L'chaim, everybody, l'chaim. Welcome to another week of Tanya. Tanya 2.0, we're calling this round. Just two technical announcements. First is next week, of course, is Shavuot, Wednesday and Thursday. So there's not going to be class next Wednesday night. Hopefully you'll all be celebrating Shavuot with your families and friends and communities. So we're going to go on break for a week. Secondly, since in the summertime we like to do Ma'ariv after the class, and the time for Ma'ariv is getting later, so as we did the last 2 years, starting the week after Shavuot, we're going to move the class 15 minutes out. So instead of starting 7:30, we'll start 7:45, so we can finish a little bit later, so we can daven Ma'ariv on time. Okay, that's just the technical stuff out of the way. Thank you, David, for sponsoring tonight's class in honor of your grandfather. Great-grandfather, Eliezer ben Moshe Aaron, Olav Shalom. There's a whole story how he even knows, because his yahrzeit is yesterday. Monday, 26th of Iyar. And there's a whole story how you even found out his yahrzeit. I don't know if you were planning to tell it tonight. You weren't planning to. I'll just say it in short. There used to be a guy who was in these classes, Yitzchak Mendel, the young guy, the beard, yes, also known as Itchy. His mom passed away last year, and they buried her in one of the cemeteries here in LA. And while we were there for the funeral, he came across a headstone with the name. Right?
Well, I can't go into this.
Because he's a Kohen. A Kohen cannot go into cemeteries. So he couldn't know. And so anyway, a whole divine providence, how you even figured out that today's his yahrzeit, and we're honoring him by eating food. I know it sounds funny, but that's one of the greatest ways to honor a soul, is when Jews in this world use physical things for godly purposes. Parentheses, that's the secret of Shavuos. Many people want to know what happened on Shavuot. We got the Torah. What do you mean we got the Torah? Abraham was keeping the Torah. Yitzchak was keeping the Torah. Torah has been with the Jewish people since time immemorial. Noach kept the Torah. Hashem commanded him to take into the ark the kosher animals and the not kosher animals. How did he know what's kosher and not kosher? Because he learned the Torah. What does it mean we got the Torah on Shavuos? We already had it. So Chassidus explains, we got the Torah. Until then, Torah could never influence the physicality of the world. You can put on tefillin, but the straps didn't become holy, you can throw it out the next second. Only after the giving of the Torah, when God came down on Mount Sinai, the worlds merged. Physicality and spirituality came together, and now you can make lasagna holy. That's the power. And that's part of why, for the soul, the greatest elevation is when, down here in the physical world, Jews get together and make a blessing for the merit of the soul. So, shekoach for that. I'm going to give you the mic in a second, but I do want to mention, many of you may have seen in the Chabad news sites, that yesterday, probably one of the greatest giants in Chabad passed away, Rabbi Kotlarsky, legendary man. He was the chairman of the Kinos HaShluchim, the annual conference that many of you were at. He always gave the opening speech. He ran it. He was the engine behind it, and he was really the engine of putting Chabad on the map in the way that the Rebbe wanted it. He was the Rebbe's right-hand man. The Rebbe appointed him to be the guy who would be in between him and his shluchim. So, like one of the posts I read yesterday says, he had a home in Brooklyn, but he lived on planes. That's where he actually was always traveling. He went to visit a shliach who had 100 Jews in his community, just to spend some time with him and see what, to have eyes and ears on the ground so they can understand what's needed. And he was constantly on the move. I don't think there's a single Chabad shliach out of the 5,000 of us that wouldn't say they were personally touched by him and that he personally knew them. That was his signature. He loved to be in personal relationships with everybody, and a giant man with a giant heart, a huge loss for the Chabad community. So it should be, our class tonight should be for his memory, Moshe Yehuda ben Tzvi Yosef. His neshama should have an aliyah. He was just buried 4 hours ago. And yes. Huh? He was buried right near the Ohel. Right near the Ohel, yes. So no, his wife stayed in Brooklyn. She was very active in the Crown Heights Women's Auxiliary, the sisterhood. But you can read up more about him. This is an incredible man. You don't come across them very often. Like they say, they don't come off the assembly line like that anymore. They just...
Isn't it the same Yossi is also, well, he passed on the same day as Yossi is
Rabbi Weiss's father. Yes, same day. Unfortunately, a long battle with pancreatic cancer. That was what took him too early. 74. In 4 days, he would be 75.
Wow.
Rosh Chodesh, yeah.
Wow, so young.
Too young. So, this is also for his memory. David, some words from the heart, please. One of my all-time favorite stories, Chassidic stories, goes like this. And I think I've told it in these classes, but some stories, you just got to say it again. In the first generation of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, he had a chassid, a very prominent follower whose name was Reb Shmuel Munkes. Reb Shmuel Munkes was a serious Talmudic genius, a deep, deep philosophical thinker, but also a bit of a jokester. He loved to play a practical joke. Got a kick out of it. Many stories about his jokes, and they always carried lessons. And one of the stories happened at a Chassidic Farbrengen. There was a Farbrengen for some sort of occasion. Late into the night, everybody's sitting and enjoying, and as is the custom till today, in order to have a successful Farbrengen, you have to have a little alcohol, but also a little Farbeisen. Farbeisen is a Yiddish word for like things to eat, things to chew on. Some food. And at one point in the night, the Chassidim decided they need some more food. Where do you go when you need food in the middle of the night in Russia? You go Uber Eats. This is before Grubhub and DoorDash and all the good stuff. You go to the local butcher. The local butcher says, perfect. Just in time. We just finished koshering one of our latest animals that we slaughtered, and we're going to give you some lung, roast lung. It's apparently very delicious. Roast lung.
Don't try this.
A delicacy, literally a delicacy.
This morning was good.
Huh?
Eggs and lung.
So they go from the butcher's home carrying this beautiful roast lung. It's like you can smell it. It's just gorgeous. And they put it down on the table, and everybody's looking at it. And you can tell everybody wants to dig in. Reb Shmuel Munkes sees what's going on. He grabs the tray, and he starts dancing around the table with it. Whoever's trying to reach it, he's like dancing away with them. Huh? The bima? Danced around the bima? Or the table? And some of the younger guys actually started to get up and like follow him. What are you doing? Give us the lung, we want to eat. And he's jumping up and down and dancing. And more people were actually getting on his case. So he ran to the corner of the room where there was a big garbage bin. And final skip and a jump. And he flips the whole plate, boom, into the garbage.
Is that the river?
Huh? No, it's the garbage. That I do know. At this point, the Chassidim are furious. First of all, we had such good farbeisen over here. You took it away. Second of all, what kind of action? That's baltashchis. Baltashchis, you're not allowed to waste food. You can't just throw out food like that. It's good food. So the young Chassidim, who were the hotheads, they're like, get on the table. We're going to give you a whipping. So Reb Shmuel obliged. He got on the table, and someone took out his belt and was about to start to whip. As he raised the belt, was about to start, the butcher comes running into the room, screaming, "Don't touch the lung, don't touch the lung." Everyone turns around, what happened? He says it was a mix-up, the wrong lung. We had 2 animals that we slaughtered today. One was kosher, one was not kosher. And by mistake, the lung that you took was the non-kosher one. I hope nobody ate it, I hope no one touched it. So now, the hotheads back off. Reb Shmuel comes off the table. And everyone's kind of like, a little in shock. And then the older chassid, one of the older ones over there, said, get back on the table. Chassidim don't have divine spirit. We don't have Ruach HaKodesh. You're playing games. You're not allowed to just play games. Get back on the table, we're going to give you a whipping. For being too spiritually advanced, you understand? So Shmuel said, no, I promise. I don't have any divine inspiration. I have no Ruach HaKodesh, absolutely not. So I said, how did you know? How did you feel that there was something wrong with the lung? He said, listen, ever since I became a chassid, ever since I dedicated my heart and soul to the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, I made a firm resolution in myself not to indulge any strong craving that I have. If I have an extra strong craving, I don't go there. And he said, tonight, when the lung came in, I had a craving like I never had a craving before. Not only that, I looked around the table and I could see the mouths watering and everybody's eyes, and I just knew that there has to be something wrong with this lung. If everybody so desires it, so wants it so much, it has to be treif. So I took it and I disposed of it, and that's it. It's a gesund, yeah. There used to be a saying that actually, I think it came down from the Alter Rebbe himself. It's a Yiddish saying. It goes like this. It says, "Was men tornit, tormenit, und was men meg, darf men it." What's not allowed is not allowed, and what's permitted you don't need. What's prohibited is prohibited, and what's allowed is unnecessary. It's actually a Tanaic dictum. This is in the Midrash. We find this concept. It says in the Torah, you should be holy. Kedoshim tiyu. How do you be holy? Says the Midrash, Kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lach. Sanctify yourself with that which is permitted to you. The Torah has a whole list of prohibitions. That's out of the question. You want to be holy? Take upon yourself more fences. Even the things that are allowed to be engaged with, keep holy. Stay a little removed. Why? The Torah itself acknowledges it's permitted. Mutar. It's mutar lach. But somehow it's still frowned upon. Why? I'm saying bichlal, a good steak tonight, the dinner, pizza. It's all permitted. Torah says make yourself holy with that which is permitted. Why? It's almost like it's frowned upon. And when people hear it, they get very protective of themselves. What do you mean? I can't indulge. I have to suffer my whole life. It's inhibiting. It's restrictive. It's this. It's that. The answer is, definitely from a Chassidic perspective, too much indulgence is never good. And you stay away not to make yourself suffer, but just because you want to live a better life. You want to live a more refined life. I mean, it's super classic. Across the board, everybody experiences it. Just had it now in my house with my wife. She has a thing with heartburn. Different foods cause her heartburn. So she goes off of these foods. I don't eat them. Why? What's wrong? You're making yourself suffer. You're not going to have this. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have delicious desserts just because it gives you heartburn. What are you, restricting yourself? And what's the answer? Obviously not. You're trying to live in a better space. You want to feel good. You want to be healthy. Eating this stuff is just not going. It's just not going to do you good. Someone's trying to lose weight, trying to get fit. Different foods make you tired. You won't be as functional at work. So you're going to stay away from certain things. Your friends will make fun of you. What are you going to say? I'm suffering? I'm not suffering. I'm in a different space. I'm trying to align myself with a different type of reality. One where these things don't interfere with my day-to-day functioning. And so, staying away becomes not a problem, but a discipline. A good discipline. A positive discipline. And Kabbalistically, we actually find it in the words. in the Hebrew word, like many things, Hebrew is such a rich language. Passing it around? Yeah. Hebrew is such a rich language that every word captures not just a translation, but the meaning, the soul of the object that's defined by that word. And two of those words are discussed in the Tanya. And that's the part actually I want to start with reading. If you have the Tanya, if not, I have some extra books over here. Let's, you want one down there? You're good? Here. Take a look at page 96. 96 at the bottom. I'm going a little bit out of order of tonight's page, but I want to lead with this concept. Bottom of 96, literally the bottom line. On the bottom line of page 96, the Alter Rebbe says, and we can see it there, this is implied by the Hebrew term heter, permissible. 97, or mutar, permitted, which literally mean untied. That's the key. It's the key here. Meaning to say that a kosher act, even if performed with self-serving motives, is not permanently tied up and bound by the negative forces, preventing it from returning and ascending to God. We use the word mutar, heter, permitted, allowed. But the literal word means to untie. What's the opposite of mutar? Asur. Asur is the Hebrew word for forbidden. If you skip a couple of paragraphs down to where it says section 2, first paragraph of section 2, the Alter Rebbe says, this temporary absorption into negative forces is not the case, however, with forbidden foods and forbidden sexual relations, whose energy is from the three completely impure klipos. Their energy remains permanently tied and bound by the negative forces. Tied is that key word there, asur, and will not ascend from there. In other words, conventionally speaking, people understand permitted and forbidden as terms relating to the person. This is allowed for you, not allowed for you. This you could do, this you can't do. Kabbalistically, the definition shifts to the very object or the very act. Certain food is tied down. It's asur. Asur, forbidden to you, but forbidden to you because it's tied down to the negative forces. It cannot, it's irredeemable. Other things are untied. They're not bound to the negative forces, they're unbound. But that's all they are, unbound. There's nothing inherently positive about them. And that's the Kabbalistic reason why we don't just indulge. Because even if something is untied, it's not a reason to go there all the way. The only reason you would go there is with a purpose, specifically a positive purpose. And that's the conversation that we left off with last week. How the klipat noga, that middle shell, the translucent shell, everything begins kind of in the middle state, and depending on your intent, it falls down on either side of the fence. If you go with a positive intent, for example, you eat or drink to open the mind, to honor the Shabbos, you say a joke, you have a good laugh, with the purpose of setting the stage for a good class, then you've done good. You've gone in with an intention, and you've intentionally engaged, not indulged, you've engaged with the permissibility, elevated it. Beautiful thing. Tonight, we're going to talk about what happens if you go on the other side of the fence. What happens if you take those neutral things, and instead of having a good intent, you have the other intent.
Less good.
Huh?
Less good.
The less good intent. Who the Alter Rebbe calls he calls them the meat stuffers and the wine guzzlers. The guys who eat for the sake of it. The guy who stands in front of the pizza pie with a knife and says, "This is how I cut carbs." Exactly. You're that guy. First in line for the Kiddush. Thank you. Thank you for the more refined example, okay? Or the guy who fills up his plate before the Kiddush. Or, the Alter Rebbe goes to a more personal, intimate part of our lives, the person who engages in a relation with his wife, lustfully. Permitted relations. His wife is pure. She was in the mikveh. No issues of the period. But the act was done with lust and desire. By the way, just as a parenthesis, we should be aware of these laws, family purity laws. 2 weeks out of the month, it's forbidden to be with your wife in a physical way while she's on her period. For 7 days after, and then, for 5 days of the period, then 7 days after. And then she goes to the mikveh, and then relations can be resumed. Of course, after menopause, it's a whole different story. But even if there was a woman who did not go to mikveh during all the years that she was on the cycle, the Rebbe would encourage that she should at least go to the mikveh once, even after menopause, to be able to be pure going forward. Because the ritual impurity that comes with the cycle only is removed with mikveh. So if, what happened, happened. But if you still have the chance to go to the mikveh, you should.
And then she doesn't have to go again.
And then, of course, she doesn't have to go again. Yeah. This is one of the core elements, by the way, of Judaism, family purity. Super, super important. But back to the question at hand. The guy is with his wife in a lustful way. And in all of these cases, the klipat noga, the translucent shell, went the other way. Instead of positive purpose, less positive purpose. So the Alter Rebbe spells out what happens. What happens is a couple of things. First of all, you've taken a holy life force and you're shoving it down. Because there is a godly life force that's animating this object, this food, this act, this thought, and you're schlepping it down. Instead of allowing it to be elevated, you're pushing it down. Second of all, the nature of the spiritually negative forces is that they don't just serve as a box that locks up godly potential. They're like bacteria. They feed off of it. The energy which a person invests in a temptation, in an indulgence, becomes food for the fungi of klipa to nurture from. So you're basically keeping the worst type of spiritual bacteria alive. The way he calls it in the Tanya is, you become a dress, a clothing for the klipa, you become a chariot for the klipa. Chariot is an ancient metaphor for what we would call today like a car. Okay, a car should, maybe today with automated vehicles it's a bit of a different question, but car should not have a will of its own. Okay, a car should be fully subservient to its driver and do exactly what it is that you want, and that's its entire being. Its entire being is there to serve the will of the driver. Huh?
It's a vehicle.
A vehicle, there we go.
That's all.
It's just a vehicle for, a conduit for the will of the driver. On the positive side, for example, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, our forefathers are called a merkava, a chariot for God. Why? Because their entire physical bodies even was simply an embodiment of God's desire. They were there just to serve Him. You want to go, turn right, right, left, left. They were completely aligned and in tune with Him. It says the Alter Rebbe, when you take it down the other way, you go the negative, you become a chariot for the negative. You basically tell the negative forces, we submit to you. You dictate how we live. You control the cheesecake or the cheesecake controls you. In this moment, it's controlling you. Because you gave in to the indulgence. Is there redemption though? Is there a way back?
Always.
Ah?
Always.
Always. Then it says there's always a way back. And the answer is that there is redemption, but it depends on what kind of bacteria you're feeding. So first, Alter Rebbe begins with permitted stuff. Permitted food. Permitted relationships. They were permitted, you just did them with the wrong intent. Maybe I shouldn't use the word wrong. Let me just use like an indulging intent, a lustful intent. You ate just to fill your belly, nothing more. So over there, returning to what we said before about mutar, untied, since it's inherently untied, it can never be fully tied down to the spiritual bacteria. And the way back is with teshuvah. When the person does teshuvah for that act, and you think it's funny to say teshuvah for the act, because what do you mean teshuvah? It wasn't a forbidden act, but there was a problematic intent. So when you return, teshuvah means to return, when you return, the energy which you put into the act also returns. He says there's a little mark that's left, even when you redeem it with teshuvah, and that's rectified after the passing. One of the experiences that the soul has after death is called chibut hakever. Chibut hakever means being shaken around in the grave. And the way it's described in the Zohar is angels shake the body like a person would shake a tablecloth. You ever have a tablecloth after a meal, right? So you can clean it, you clean it, but then you go outside and you shake it off to get the last stuff off of it.
As long as your wife's not watching.
Yeah, of course. So the same thing over here. The person can only do so much teshuvah, and the angels come and they do the final shaking. Now, the more shaking you do in this world, the easier the cleaning is in the next. Like that metaphor that we heard in yeshiva about the guy who bought himself a pet chicken. He's always wanted to have a pet chicken. Beautiful, white, pristine chicken. Brings it home, says, my chicken, we're going to have a good time together. First activity, go play outside. Puts the chicken outside, sits down to have breakfast. 2 minutes later, he looks outside, and his gorgeous white chicken is dirty and filthy, rolling around in the dirt. Can't believe it. Calls in the chicken, and he says, "What'd you do to yourself? I'm going to take care of you." And he starts cleaning the feathers slowly, and it's painstaking. You ever try to deal with a chicken? The dirt gets in there, and he's cleaning it, and finally, after 3 hours, he cleans it, and it's white and beautiful again. He says, "Okay, I'm going to give you another chance. Don't get dirty, okay? You're beautiful." Puts it outside. And of course, 3 minutes later, there it is in the dirt. And the process repeats itself. He gets all upset. He calls the chicken in, cleans it off, takes him 4 hours this time. He says, "You do it one more time, I'm not even going to come to help you." Puts the chicken out. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, the chicken's dirty. So the guy says, "You know what? Too bad. I'm not coming. I'm not coming to help. Just watch the chicken." Chicken plays and plays for half an hour. After half an hour, the chicken gets up, goes like this, and in 3 seconds, all the dirt is off. And he goes, "Wow. Look at that. Look at that. You can try to clean somebody else, clean them once, clean them twice. They're going to get back in the mud. In the end of the day, what does it require? That the person himself, the chicken himself, get up, shake yourself off. And when you shake yourself off, in 3 seconds, the whole thing is over. That's when tshuva comes from within. Tshuva comes from within. It's like, you did what you weren't supposed to do. You intended things you weren't supposed to intend. But get up, shake yourself off,
That's a great analogy.
and you go on. But bottom line is it can be redeemed. There's a little cost maybe after with the little shake around, but it can be redeemed. Why can it be redeemed? Because inherently it's permitted. Inherently it's untied. Inherently it's not bound to that reality, to that version of reality. But then you have forbidden acts. Acts that are not just tied down because you intended them, or they're not just brought down because you thought about something, they're inherently forbidden. So not just you had a steak just to have a steak, you ended up eating non-kosher meat. Not just you had a permitted relationship in a lustful way, it was actually forbidden to be with whoever you were with, or if it's with your wife at the time that it's forbidden. The relationship was forbidden. Forbidden in Hebrew, asur means tied down. Tied down means it's stuck. Tied down means classic tshuva is not just going to bring it up. As a matter of fact, the Alter Rebbe at the baseline says there is no coming back until Mashiach comes. Because what happens when Mashiach comes? If you think about it, when Mashiach comes, it says death is going to be swallowed forever. Death meaning all kinds of death, even spiritual death, spiritual dead forces. The klipa is going to be gone. So when the klipa is gone, only life remains. Because there has to be godly life in everything, even in the forbidden stuff. That's also vivifying it. So when Mashiach comes, all the negative goes away, all the evil departs, and what remains is the life, and that kind of has an ascent and is redeemed once again. But that's it.
You're saying there's no going back from that?
At a basic level, the divine energy which you've schlepped down is locked in the trapdoor. We don't know the code. Only Mashiach knows the code. He can't redeem it. There is one way, though. Like Dennis says, there's always something. The Alter Rebbe says there's one way, nowadays, even nowadays, to redeem it. Tzedakah. That was book 4, yeah. In book 4, all the letters. Tzedakah had the answer to all the questions. Here it's a little bit, it costs a little more, let's call it, than tzedakah.
Build a Chabad school.
Huh?
Build a Chabad school.
Build a Chabad school? Did I say the joke about that guy who, the non-religious guy who came to the rabbi? Yeah, okay. He said, I have $3 million, I'm sponsoring a school, but one condition. None of the students can wear a kippah or a tzitzit. I'm anti-religious, nobody. Rabbi said, no problem. He built a girls' school. Huh?
The one way.
The one way. What's the one way? The one way is actually hinted in the Talmud. The Talmud says, tshuva is so powerful that it can convert zdonot lezachiot. It can convert an act performed defiantly, willingly, purposefully, into a merit, into a mitzvah. Tshuva has the power to transform a negative act, and not just any negative act, a negative act done purposely, it will count as a check mark, it will count as a positive act. Doesn't explain much how that works in the Talmud, but Chassidus is full of it. Chassidus says, and today I think we all have an appreciation for it more as we see the development of psychology and addicts specifically as they respond to recovery. There are two types of people that reach out for help. Two types of people that actually get help and get well. One type is the one who is looking for more. There's like an unhappiness. They hear there's some good on the other side. Life is good enough to allow them to be motivated to do what it takes, and they'll go get it. And they'll have a more wholesome life and a more peaceful life. But there's a darker type of person who reaches out for recovery and help and growth when they hit rock bottom. There's nowhere else to go. The cloud is so dark and so deep. The depression and the suffering is so acute. It bounces them back into the place that they have to be. In a way, and you'll hear this if you go today on YouTube, this is full of it. You can hear people that are previous or addicts in recovery, they will talk about how their darkness became a catalyst for the growth. It springboarded them into the growth. And looking back in honest reflection, they consider it almost a blessing in their lives to have gone through that journey and then arise from the depths. I don't know how they understood this part of Tanya years ago when this wasn't a common phenomenon. But the Alter Rebbe actually describes it in these terminologies. He says, when your sins become the catalyst for your repentance, then they count on the check side because they've brought you to where you are today. And it's very similar to this language that we hear about today. The more, I guess, relatable analogy that the Chassidim would give throughout the generations is they would say, what's the difference between somebody running to collect $1 million or somebody running away from a lion chasing them to death? Both are running. Both are running. But the guy who's running to collect $1 million, even if he's motivated, even if he's racing other people, there's only so much that he'll put into it. But the guy running away from the lion, and he knows his life is at stake, that's a whole different type of running. It's a whole different category. As the other joke goes, right? With the husband and wife that were out vacationing. Okay, maybe we shouldn't say about husband and wife. Let's say it about two friends, okay? There were two friends out on the safari, vacationing, and they came upon a lion. And lo and behold, the lion looked them straight in the eye, and he hadn't had breakfast that day, and he starts to chase them. And one of the guys turns around and starts running. So his friend goes, what are you, crazy? You're going to outrun a lion? The guy says, no, I'm going to outrun you. You run to the chest, you run, in other words, the golden chest of gold coins. It's one type of running. Very fast you may run. But it doesn't carry your whole essence. When you run away from death, because you feel what this death is about to do to you, in the physical sense it's always the easiest because we can feel the threat to our lives. But also spiritually, mentally, emotionally, when we feel that thing that's holding us hostage, and we know is about to push us over the edge, and we run away from that, and we run away with our whole being, in a way, if you think about it, the negativity became part of the journey of positivity. It got you going. And because it got you going, it counts on the side of merit. When you do it seriously in that way, the Alter Rebbe says, you got to do it seriously. The second it's not that seriously, no, it's not going to redeem those actions. But if a person engaged in enough forbidden relationships and enough forbidden foods, and then he bounces back because of them, there's redemption even in this life for that. It's not a license to go do it and say, I'm going to do it and then I'm going to go and have that kind of repentance. No, that's not allowed. Of course not. But after the fact, examining such a person's behavior, if that's how he arrived at the new growth of positivity, then yeah, his past becomes part of his future. That's why the Rambam says that in the place where the most perfect of tzaddikim stand, the place where Balei Tshuva stand, even the most perfect of tzaddikim cannot stand there. Why? Because when you're a perfect tzaddik, you don't have any of the dark side helping you out. You only have the light side. Fantastic. It's a very clean type of record, not so visceral and not so raw. When pain is part of your past, when difficulty and suffering is part of what shaped you, you are on a different level. You're on a different level. And so that's where he closes kind of on that note. Says you indulge in something permitted, basic tshuva will get you back. Something forbidden, at a baseline level, no redemption. But if you can make it become part of your new identity, that's the secret to a whole new portal of success. So each of us can reflect on that. Some of us have been in difficult places, darker places, not even so dark. Everyone knows what they've been through. The secret is if you can have it become part of who you are and not push it to the side, but to process it, to go through it, and to emerge better for it, well, now you've done the best of both worlds. L'chaim.